Hey there, Brandon. And can you still hear me, Megan?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I should be getting everyone else in just a minute. Hi. Hey. Hey, Carson.
Oh, there we go.
Hey, Mike. Oh, video too, huh? All right. So we're getting people on. Right, what I'm going to do is once we have this part full with the video, then I'm going to just open another chat screen. So you'll get another invitation to a chat. Carson, you've been able to do this a couple of times to chat on both sides. So the people that can't, that are not part of the video, they'll have one single place to chat instead of trying to find multiple places like they did before. So you'll also get an invitation to that. We've got Bernetta.
Yes, hi.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How about you?
Good.
Good. How's everybody?
Good.
It's going. Yeah. You're coming to the end of this year, aren't you, Bernetta?
Yes, I am. I'm so excited about it. Woo.
Well, I guess a lot of you are. So we have Brandon will be and Mike too.
Very much.
How many more days is it? Hey, Patricia.
11 and a half days.
Yeah.
Nice.
Exams.
That's great. Good. Well,
Are y'all talking about school?
yeah, we're wondering how many more days you have.
We have 13.
13. They've only got 11. Okay.
Oh.
Nice to come to the end of it, though, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh.
Hey, are you feeling better?
I do feel better. I went back to work today. I had to have more blood work done, but I do feel better.
It's a tough time to be sick like that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Since we've got the video part is pretty well full, what I'm going to do is I'm going to send an invitation to just a regular chat on the side too. So you will also get that. I told that to a few of you at the beginning. So if you get that and you want to open it, that's great. That way we can see the other people in the chat as well. Right? In case they have any difficulty getting into this chat. We had that before and people were pretty worried. So got a couple of different options on the events page. Or you can chat like through the chat bar, but we'll just do a chat bar. I thought it might be easier. So give me 1 second on that.
Oh, I need my charger. Give me that right there.
way I can try to keep up with all of you. All right, so you should have gotten an invitation, or you might have just, somebody got it. So. All right, so we're going to be talking about structure. I'm not going to keep all of you who are here and rolling. We're going to be talking a little bit about structural family therapy tonight. Now, when you, do you have any questions before we get started? Any basic questions that might help you to have answered right now? All right, we're going to roll on in. Okay, so structural family therapy is just exactly what it sounds like. It's family therapy that is focused on the structural components of the family. Those components are pretty clearly articulated in the readings that you had for this week, and for people who've started posting their structural maps, it's clear that you got a good sense of, like Brandon has posted his map, a good sense of what those, how the subsystems work and how relationships can be mapped out across the map. I think these maps are really useful in session because they help you to see places that you can focus your work, right? You've got a lot of different formal assessments that you can use with structural family therapy and informal ones, and you can use formal assessments in more informal ways, and using a structural map is a really good way to help yourself gain some insight into what you're seeing in the session. So when you did your structural maps for the family, the TV family, did anything jump out at you that you hadn't thought of before?
I just thought that it was extremely unique how one person in the family relationship had a specific relationship with this person, but then when they had a relationship with someone else, it was completely polar different. Mm-hmm. Just how the quality and the style of their relationships was so different from person to person, even though they have their own personality.
You know, a point you made, you said like they use different love languages than what you might expect to see in a couple that's pretty appropriately balanced and closely connected. But for this family, that's what works for them, right? Like, because on your map, Brandon, the mother and father were both elevated above the children. There's certainly some relationships that could be a focus if you're working with the family. But as far as balancing the hierarchy and the coupled relationship, structurally, they have that pretty well in balance. There are other families that you see that the balance is a little different. I think the Gilmore girls, I don't know if you've gotten to see Jenna's post yet, but she mapped the Gilmore girls' relationships. And in that one, the mother is much closer to the power line. And then the grandmother and grandfather are more highly elevated. And you can see when you watch that, if you watch that show, how that plays out in terms of impacting her that mother's decision-making processes, and how she moves forward with confidence or not with confidence at sometimes. Power definitely has a major role in a family. Did anyone else notice anything about their families when they were mapping them that they wanted to mention at the beginning of our conversation here?
I didn't notice. My question is, if you took something contemporary, like the middle, and you did something that was set in the 50s, like the Happy Days,
yeah,
how would it look? Would you still have the same levels that you do, or do you think it would be different?
You'd have the same structure. You'd be mapping the same things, right? But how do you think that map might look different?
Well, I think for the most part that most of the power went to the man. He made all the decisions, and he earned the money, and the woman stayed at home. And while she might be on the same level, I just think that there's a difference in who actually has power when you compare it to today.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. You're. I think that so. If you mapped families that would have been deemed as functioning effectively, you would probably have seen from the 50s. You would see something very different than what you would see if you're mapping families that were deemed functioning effectively now. Right now, and that being said, some families now function in that way too, and it works for that family. But on the whole, if you were to map a lot of TV families from that time, the message that was being sent across societal conversation was that the father was at the top and held control. Probably you would see looser connections or more disconnected connections between the father and the children as well. Wouldn't you expect from TV families from an earlier time, or you would typically expect to see that. So, but now families from this time. In society, we have the full range of complexities for families get shown in our TV families that we see in the world.
And just to be clear, you would call those societal expectations environmental factors? Is that what you would call them? Okay.
That's right. And when we're talking about families moving through time, that we had that map of the horizontal stressors. You know, you had vertical stressors and horizontal stressors. Those things would look different for families over time.
Okay.
And so families, one of the things that we see is that we have people you have people who are the sandwich generation now, right? So you have people who are living with their in-laws or their parents in whatever capacity, in-laws or their own parents, living in the house with them while they're raising children. And the grandparents living in the home function under totally different societal norms and expectations for families, right?
Right.
And then the children are being raised in this different world. And so this sandwich generation sometimes has a very difficult time of trying to adjust. You know, structurally, what looks appropriate for their family, and how do they, if they have this sense of respect and responsibility and reciprocity to their parents, how do they honor that and still craft a family for themselves that works for their family? Now, people who are different genders are different wage earners at this point. Maybe you're in a family where the woman makes more money than the man, and that certainly impacts that structural. It may also impact the structural relationships as well. And like Brittany mentioned in the chat on the side, you know, power gives the family member the upper hand. And so, like, think about like what are the different ways power is conveyed in a family, or different reasons that one family member might hold more power than another family.
I think sometimes a lot of like people have power. They say the male has the dominant power because they're supposed to make all the decisions, are supposed to be logical enough to make the decisions. And I think before, like someone was saying, like the 1950s type of family, women were more emotional and affectionate, so they were supposed to be on that nurturing side, so men had more logic. So I think that's how the power gets in that way, and you make a lot of decisions based upon who has the power.
Well, and then what, along with that part, Brittany, what does your family, or the people who hold the power in the family, what do they value about the decision-making process? So, like, if your family and how it came together really values, if you have a bunch of people in your family, or some people, and like grandparents and people, like generationally, if people have valued the emotional decision-making approach, then that person could end up holding more power. But if you're in a family where, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was about to say that makes sense, because I guess it's just based upon what do you convey as power, or like you said, what do you value as in it, because that makes sense.
Well, and I'm I think we're agreeing with each other. Like, you know, that decision, it's decision making. The person who makes the decisions, that's the person who holds the power. And how do they get to be the one who makes the decisions?
I guess whoever just decides to step up and take leadership, because some people, I know I'm not that type of person. They're like, hey, let me just be in charge. So whoever decides to take charge of the situation and not have a lot of chaos, I guess that's the person that is deemed to have the power in that situation.
Yeah. So it can be a person who steps forward to take a role. What else makes one person be the one who gets to make the decisions in a family?
I think you can be forced into it. I think I am way more outgoing and more talkative. My husband tends to be more shy, and he tends to whatever you want, that type thing. And so then it's kind of like I have to make the decisions. And not that I'm saying I have a problem with that, because I'm not. I'm just saying that sometimes it can be forced upon you.
Yeah. So one person if you're in a partnered relationship, one person can just be a person who goes along and who's not one who's going to step up and make a decision. So then, if the other person's personality, is a decision, is a person who will make a decision, you end up doing it. Kind of just falls to you. Yeah. Yeah.
I think another thing too, like who has power in like families, like my dad would probably be the one who has power, and I think it's not because he's like this big tough man. It's because he has 30+ years of knowledge and experience over me and my brother. And I mean, my mom is a little bit more laid back, so she's not really like the take the reins kind of person. So I think it kind of falls onto him because he is the older, more responsible of me and my brother, more than me and my brother, I guess, of the four of us.
Right. That goes right. That goes along with what Patricia was saying, and then also what we've got Kate and Jenna were both saying the same too. Like, so a personality. So Carson's adding wisdom and experience, right? But then the other part of it that we had been discussing was that personality piece. If some personality traits make it possible for one person to hold more power in the family. And
I think it's.
Go ahead,
I'm
Laura.
sorry. I was going to say that I think it depends on who's most driven and wants to take that family further and further, because there could be someone that's like, oh, it's whatever. Then the other person, like you were saying, personality is like, no, we have to be here in this amount of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. So it can be like if one person is more driven. And if it now thinking about back to what we said before about families of times gone past, then was there as much flexibility for personality to allow you to shift into a role of power as there is now in a family?
No.
I don't think so.
No, I think it's societal expectations that kind of hindered that.
Yeah, it was much more that the male in the family held the power.
Mm-hmm.
And that was even often true in like we have in some of the genogram readings. Well, I don't think we'll cover it, but from the text, the genogram text, you'll get a genogram reading next week, and in that text that I pull it from, they talk about Bill Clinton's family and how mother was when she was a single parent and she lived with her. When she was a single parent at that time in society, her power was really conveyed to her father. Her father got to make a lot of the decisions for her, even though there wasn't a male parent in her single parent household, you know?
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, but okay, so you have an idea of like how you might get power. Wisdom, experience. Taylor made a really, really good point. She said, so if your family of origin, whatever your family of origin valued as how you held power, that will impact what you value as who should hold power in your family.
Mm-hmm.
It's just so if you grew up in a family where the male is always the head of the household, you may find yourself typically having that same approach in your family. Yeah, that family of origin definitely is a way of conveying power. Money is power too. Financial contributions in this society, financial contributions can also impact like who holds power in family.
I think that's a good point. Most of the time, people will go based upon like whoever makes the much money, who's ever contributing, like you said, more is the one that gets to make decisions. I contribute, I make the family who it is. So.
Yeah. So that part. Hold on, just a minute. Let's see how that goes. Yeah. So that can certainly do it too. So like who makes the money can. It doesn't always just grant the person power, but it can be like what Brittany's saying, like it's kind of a sense of I should have some power because I'm making this contribution. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, and then so after you get power, how do you think those structures maintain it? Like how do the structures that we're looking at structural maps and we're talking about subsystems or boundaries or relationships that are engaged or disengaged or close or not close. Like, how do those structures maintain that power in a family? Or do you think they not play any role?
I think it's the rigid boundaries are the ones that can, if you have a rigid boundary in the family, that's how you maintain control, because you're lessening the amount of communication among this system and the subsystems. So when you lessen the communication, then you can keep the power.
Yeah, yes, if you lessen, so that's certainly one way, and that would be like a more, might be more negative way to think about it. But like if the person holding the power can cut off or isolate some subsystems from other subsystems or individuals from others, that can certainly be a way of consolidating power. Because they don't partner up, right?
I think there's also the reality of dependence. When you have someone in the family that steps up as the leader, and you have children that are seeing, oh, this is the person providing for me, this is the person that I need when I call someone from school, they see the system is already set into place, this routine of this person that they can be dependent on.
Mm-hmm. Hey, that's a really important thing to think about too. So in it might have been Brandon's structural map. He had one of the children closer to the power line. Now, when we think about, so what he's saying right now is that, well, if you're dependent upon someone, then they hold some power over you. That's totally, we all agree with that, right? But if you're in a family where you find that the family is constantly reorganizing or adjusting to meet the need of one dependent, or that person and what that person needs impacts every other decision that the family makes, then who really holds the power? Would the parents be above that power line, or would it be the kid? Think about it. You know, one family. All of you can think of a family right now that you know the child is actually holding the power in the family. Mm-hmm. The decisions that the family makes, even the relating of one partner to another, is impacted by how the child is responding and dictating how that relationship can be. Sometimes they might be dependent upon the parents because they're children. You know, they got to have us. We got to do the things that they need for them. But sometimes we structure ourselves can mean that the children end up holding the power. I'm trying to think of a family on TV that would show that. I can't think of one right now, but maybe one will come to us. It kind of goes along with what Bernetta had mentioned in the chat on the other side. She said sometimes power is understated, like Archie Bunker. He thought he had the power, but really Edith had it all, or Edith really had it all. That's true. So we have like overt power and that everybody sees, and then you see that another member actually is the one that's holding the power. So you might map the family on the whole at the beginning and say, well, these are the parents and these are the kids and this is how it falls out. But really, when you look at it, someone else in the family actually holds the power, be it one of the partners that doesn't seem to hold it more visibly, or be it one of the children. That was one of the things from families from before too. If you seem to hold a lot of visible power in the family, you make a lot of decisions for the family, like males from years and years ago may have done, but you are not closely related to the family, like you don't have close, warm relationships with the family member, you might find that someone else actually guides the direction and trajectory of the family. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But when you're thinking about, or as we go along, as we're thinking about boundaries and structure, like, you know, how do those boundaries and structure maintain power? They maintain power because they maintain balance. Whatever a family, according to structural family therapy, a family works towards homeostasis, right? It's like water in a glass. If you pour water in a glass, and you're holding the glass on the side, well, then the water tries to balance itself out across the glass that way, right? If you stand it up, it rebalances the other way. Families kind of do like that. But what we know structurally is that some of the things that we hold in our families to be true, and the relationships and the processes that keep us at a level of homeostasis that's comfortable for the family, not really functional, or it doesn't really promote wellness for the family and the individual members. That's why for structural family therapy, you have to get in as a counselor and rebalance. You're very active in this form of family therapy. And so you get in there and you shift people around. If we were looking at the Archie Bunker Edith piece, like Bernetta mentioned, then you would put, if he was really isolated from other family members and kind of acting like a jerk or whatever, you'd put he and Edith together to talk together some, because you'd focus on strengthening that partnered relationship first, and then you would move out to the children. If you're looking at Brandon's post on the community page, and you see how there's some conflictual relationships between there is a conflictual but close relationship between the mother and the oldest son. That's one place you might want to do some work. But first, what you would probably do is shift around and say, okay, so what I've seen is that the dad is not as closely connected to the two younger children. The mom has a conflictual relationship with the older son. So how I see this family is going to reflect what I think they should be. That's a physical unbalancing of the current level of homeostasis for the family when they come to session. And you're going to have to think about that too with your family for your family video. Think like how comfortable would that be for you? How comfortable would that be for you as a counselor to do that unbalancing? Say, this is what I see, and I'm going to shake it up a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think based on like that video that we saw where it was like the dad and the daughter and the son, right, where like the son felt like he was being attacked by, I think the scenario was like he came home late or something like that. I mean, just to see how, like it did seem like when I was watching, it did seem like, the dad and the sister were the ones kind of attacking him. But once the counselor told rearranged them and put the dad to the side and kind of told him like, okay, I'm gonna ask you to just kind of stay out of it and just see how this would have played out if you didn't involve yourself in it, I guess.
Yeah.
And it was just really interesting to see like the dynamics after they like did like the role play, I guess you can say, when the dad was involved in the original. Yeah.
An enactment in structural family therapy, but yeah, it's like a role play.
Yeah. So, I mean, it seems it wouldn't. I feel like I guess as a counselor, it wouldn't seem too bad or as scary to do that, because sometimes that's what families need. They need like a outside perspective where to them, that might be the way they interact with each other on a daily basis. But when you kind of put them out of, that routine that they might be used to, it might be some, they might see something else that originally they didn't see. So, I mean, I thought it was pretty cool to see that.
Yeah, I agree completely. And Taylor said the same thing in the chat on the side. That rebalancing, that shaking it up and putting the children where you take the dad out of the mix, because the dad and the sister they were using their closeness as a way to isolate him, the son, from their family unit. They're taking their subsystem and giving their subsystem more power than the overall family unit. So by rebalancing it, she put the children on the same playing field. You know what that also does is elevates the dad's power. Because if he is closely aligned or to almost the point of enmeshment with the daughter, then that reduces his power, but because it elevates hers. And as a parent, we would expect in structural family therapy, you'd want the dad to have power elevated over the children as appropriate. Now, those children were older, they were getting older, but still, in this family in that time, it was important to elevate the dad. Yeah, I think it's really good. And I think it is fun. Like, I love doing structural family therapy. It is fun in session because a lot of what you see happening, you say, this is what I see, and this is how we're going to change it up. And you start to change it right in session. Now, sometimes families never, sometimes it feels really good and they leave happy. But if they were able to just change it easily by themselves, they wouldn't be in counseling in the first place, right? So it's not always comfortable, and it can be really difficult. And sometimes families get angry, or really they try to check out, and then you have to process through that resistance and say, what does that mean for you, and what does that mean for us, and this is counseling. Other than that, in that processing of the resistance, there's still so much information. And when a family's in front of you, what you see happening is, if you'll attend to what you see happening, if you'll attend when you walk in the room tonight, if you're with a family or a group of people that are together a lot, if you'll attend to how people sit and when someone starts to speak and someone's interrupting another person, who like backs right down to allow that other person to go on and talk. If you'll attend to all of that, you'll get a real sense of the structure very quickly and who holds power and how that's impacting those relationships.
I was there.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Would you say that some families maybe are even unaware that they have these type of relationships with other family members? I think, I know for me, I just become so accustomed to being part of my family, and my dad's interacts in his own way, and this is how he talks, and this is what he does, and this is how he interacts with me. So I think I just become maybe accustomed to it. Do you think that that's one of the reasons why this is something good to use with families, because they're not even aware that they're having these relationships?
Oh yeah, absolutely, right. Because how often do we reflect on that, right? Like, who holds the power in our family? And power is pretty fluid too. Like, you'll have a structural map makes it look like it's static over time, but honestly, power is kind of fluid in different situations as well. Now, you typically will find one person holds the power most often, but there are certain situations that are going to make that more complex than just yes or no, does the person hold power, right? But yeah, most people are not aware of it. Yeah. So raising in the family, that part is consistent across all types of everything you're going to learn about counseling in this program. That piece is always consistent. The part of helping foster insight in your client, whether it's with family or an individual, right? Fostering insight, that's what we try to do. And so Mike mentioned that he was impressed that the counselor, he said how the counselor basically told the dad to stay out of it in the video. She did it very tactfully, but I love the way she went about it. Yeah, that's in sessions in the internship, I always have someone who says, "Oh, my client, they talk and talk and talk, and I can't stop them. I don't know how to break in." You can always stop them. You say, "Wait right there," just like that the counselor did. Just wait right there. You shared a lot of important information with me, and I want to make sure that I'm tracking it and not missing something. So let me get back to this point, or let me stop you right there. With the dad, what's her overall focus? That's the part about being a skilled counselor, is to be able to keep your eye on the ball. What's the focus you're working towards? And so when you stop somebody, or when you break in, or when you rebalance, it's like, what's your purpose? So how can you convey that to them in a way that they could hear, right? So Dad, Dad, I'm gonna give you permission to not. I can't remember exactly how she said it, but I'm gonna give you permission.
That's the way she said it.
Yeah, like that.
Yeah, she said, "I'm gonna give you permission," and she said it 2 or 3 times. I mean, it was funny to me.
Well, he was able to get the picture, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like she was putting him in his place, but she did it very tactfully. So
she was giving him a space that was different than the one he'd been occupying. But that's the rebalancing part, right?
That's right. Yep.
So when you think about working with your family this week, next week, to make your video, like the structural piece of it really can inform your process about what you're going to be attending to in session. If you were doing a session right now, just with what you just have learned about structure, what are some things you'd want to attend to as a counselor? What were things that you'd want to notice and make a note of, and pull into your understanding to help inform your understanding of the family?
Well, like you said, the way they sit together, who sits together. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How they sit together, just how they interact with each other. Like you said, I mean, you touched on all of this. Does somebody cut somebody off or interrupt another one when they're talking? Just how those interactions go between the different members and the and the subgroups.
Mm-hmm.
And I
I
think
think
body language is really telling. How are they when they're talking to this specific person? How are they appearing? Are they do they have their arms crossed? Are they closed off? When the mom's talking, are they open? And so I think body language is something that you can kind of look out for.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I was gonna say nonverbals.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. In fact, in the video we watched with the family, the brother, the son, you noticed he had his arms crossed right off the get-go.
Right.
Yep.
So I was wondering how that was going to go.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, it's tricky. Like the nonverbals, they can be pretty tricky too. Taylor's mentioning about the physically how they interact with each other. You know, that goes right along with what we're all saying. So if you've got a toddler, if a family comes in and there's a toddler in the room, and the toddler's constantly like holding on to one of the parents, and that parent hugging the toddler and rubbing the toddler's head, and you know, like really, if that parent tries to speak, the toddler's like all in the middle of it. Would you view that differently than if an 8-year-old was doing that?
Yes. I think you also have to consider their age and consider where they're at developmentally and cognitively.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's appropriate for, you would expect a toddler to interact in that way. Now, if it was an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old doing that, that's not age-appropriate behavior.
Right. Now, if an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old came in and started that way, but then was able to, the parent comforted that child in a sense, got him kind of stable in the room, and then the kid went back to that kid's space, that's fine, right? These things happen. If a toddler continues to do it and only really does it when that parent tries to speak, that would make me want to watch if the toddler's trying to be a buffer, and if there's a buffer some way, that kid's serving as a buffer by getting people off track and not paying attention and not engaged in what could be a difficult conversation. Is that a role that the kid typically plays in the family? Everybody lets that kid play. I mean, that could be an issue. So you watch it all, and then you have to decide: does it make sense? Does it seem appropriate? And what might we want to do about it? And like Kate mentioned, it is all very complicated. Kate's talking about it's complicated who holds power and how different people hold power on different things and different responsibilities. Like, that's complicated. Like, what is appropriate physical reactions to each other or physical interactions with each other? What's age appropriate? All of it is pretty complicated.
I think too.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I was gonna say I think too. It also tells a lot. Like for example, if you have that situation of the toddler, not only how much interaction is there between that parent, but how much interaction is between the other parent. So does the other parent ever step in, or does the other parent ever say anything to the child? That speaks volumes as to who's doing most of that work.
Yeah, exactly. It really does. And you might have a situation where a session starts, and you find that one parent is not really engaged in the session because that parent is so busy trying to parent, to occupy this person here and that person there, and tell this person where the bathroom is, and this person that they can go, this child, you know, that they can go out into the hall, and they never really engage in the adult part of the session. And what purpose does that serve? Is that a role that's forced on that parent? Is that does that serve a purpose that allows the other person space and freedom, and that's why it functions like this, or what? You know, like what purpose does it serve? Is it you know, and how might it be done differently? That is tricky. There's a lot to watch. There's a lot to watch. But structural family therapy, more so than some of the other theories, you'll get great techniques, and I really hope that you'll take time with your reading, because you'll get really useful techniques that you can use with a lot in groups, with individuals, and definitely with families, from all of your readings that you get, right? But structural family therapy, to me, more than most of the other ones, provides you with like a pretty clear process for saying, okay, I'm looking for boundaries, I'm looking for subsystems and relationships, I'm looking for closeness of relationships, I'm looking for this structure. You can map it out and see what seems to be working and what doesn't work. Mecca made the point about paying attention to how the family responds to each other's responses to verbals and nonverbals, and how do they really communicate with each other. What do you think about that piece for structural family therapy that asks you to join like a distant relative?
I thought that was really interesting. Almost a little bit confusing because I feel like up to this point we've been told, like the whole self-disclosure and, keep it to a minimum, only when it's necessary. It's all about, it's still all about the family and stuff. So when we talk about structural family, it's almost a little bit different. It's like it's a little bit more direct. It says, the counselor should almost seem like a distant relative. So it's really interesting you think about that when, up to this point we've almost been taught to like not think that way, I guess.
Right. It is a different sort of approach in that.
Right.
And I look at it from a teacher's point of view. I have colleagues that don't share nothing about their private life, nothing about their own children. They don't disclose anything to parents when they come into conferences. But I am pretty open with mine, and I have children, my own children, and there's some things I can talk to them and we can relate to, and I just feel like I have a warmer classroom and a warmer relationship. I could be, all professional, or I could be warm and opening like a distant.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the piece of it. The joining it like a distant relative is really focused on a couple of parts. A major piece is to get to join with the family so that the family feels comfortable with you. I have a mentor who I have learned so much about counseling from, and she, when it comes to mimesis, like that, having your affect, your tone, to really align very congruently with the clients. Like when she slides in with her family for structural family therapy to start a session, as she begins that session, once she's had a session, she's gotten comfortable with the family, it seems like you hear her. She sounds just like them. She uses the same tone as the family. Her accent aligns with the families in an appropriate way. She just really joins tightly with them. And as being part of that system, it's a little easier to make that shift, to encourage the shift. But the other part about the distant relative piece that I think can help clarify a little bit is kind of informal, but I'm going to share it with you anyway, is that, think about when you go to a family event with extended family. When you leave and you go home, don't you talk about those family members with your own family? You do. You reflect on it and you think, this is not working, or they're really there, or this is working really well, and they've got that looks nice. I mean, that's working for them, or what are they doing with that kid? That's part of it too, right? That reflecting on what works structurally and what is not working, and how do we rebalance. Like that's really critical, and that's something that I think many of us are pretty familiar with.
That's the first time I've ever heard that.
I really appreciated Jenna's disclosure too. I don't know if you can see this, so I'm going to read it if you can, just for those of you who may not be able to. Jenna says, I agree with Alita. I felt awkward and kept worrying about if I was engaging enough when I was doing my video. I felt that I was giving too much advice. Like Alita said, I feel we've been taught not to give advice and ask more questions, and to ask more questions, and I definitely caught myself doing that in my video session. But yeah, family counseling, you are trying to open up that family narrative, and the only way to open that family narrative is to get them talking and to get that process going, get them interacting with each other so that you can shift it up. And then as a structural family therapist, if you function from that theoretical standpoint, you can be very active, and there's going to be quite a bit of direction and engagement. What you'll see though is that if you do it well, that after a while the family begins the rebalancing you did takes hold, and so then that becomes their new norm, their new balance. You can ask them to do something in session, do activities, do some work together, and as you step back and watch, you say that's it. That's what they were trying to get to, and there it is. And they can really take it outside of session and use it. The other thing about structural family therapy is that a good way to do your rebalancing and to get the dynamics going in session is to do activities. It allows you an opportunity to really do some interesting activities with the family. But it sounds like for some of you that the structural might feel good, like a good fit. For some people, it might feel a little more like something you have to work into if you were choosing to use it. I think it's perfectly appropriate. You're going to learn about a lot of different theories, and some will resonate well with you, and some will not be your best fit.
Well, I really like that it was, I mean, I think from the readings, it was like rooted from like Alfred Adler's like therapy and stuff. So I know like when we did that in our first semester when we were taking like the theories class, that was like a theory that I really enjoyed. So when I started reading about this one and how it, I mean, it was kind of, it kind of explored that a little bit deeper. So it took some parts of it, but kind of made it its own, right? So I really enjoyed that part of the structural therapy, and in that sense, I really feel like it would be something that I definitely will use in the future.
Good, good. I mean, that's good to see some of those pieces. You know, like we've talked about with theories before, they didn't develop in a vacuum or in isolation, right? There are a lot of relationships across theories, and you'll see some parts that really seem to meld well together, or a theorist was drawn to some parts of a theory, and then as they developed their own theory, those parts were integrated. That's a good point, Alita. Were there any parts that felt definitely like I don't get this, I will never get this, and you just don't understand it? Anything like that? None? So if we gave you a little quiz right now, everybody's just going to nail it? All right. Well, let me ask you one. I'm asking one piece then. There's a little section in your reading that's on the pathology of boundaries, like boundaries that were not appropriate or did not work well for the system. It says the ones that were too permeable, the boundary was they were just too connected. That's called enmeshed. Mm-hmm. And then others that are too rigid has the person very disengaged from the system. Do you feel like that part will be when we were doing our structural maps? Most people drew a circle around, like like the circle around their subsystem. That's perfectly appropriate. Sometimes what you'll see is that you'll when you do a structural map, some people will draw those circles really heavy for like to show that they're rigid, or they will show them as more diffuse, you know, and that can, because sometimes a subsystem is very clearly separate from the rest of the family, and sometimes it's more connected to the rest of the family. That can be either way, can work for families. But with that piece about boundaries being too rigid or too enmeshed, do you think that that's something you can kind of see out in the world pretty clearly, or do you think that might be a little more difficult to determine?
Well, I think it's easier to distinguish that with some families than with others. I mean, you know, some people are more open, and you can get a better read on them, and then some families are more, you know, kind of closed, and it's just harder to tell.
Yeah. And culturally, that can play a role in how the family sets up those boundaries too. Give me an example of an enmeshed. Like if you were working with a family, and there was an enmeshed relationship between two of the members of the family. Give me an example of it. Anybody?
Well, it would be like if a mother and a son formed a relationship, and I'm stealing this because I did read it, against, and you know, kind of alienated the father. They made him out to be the enemy.
Yep.
And the son felt like he couldn't leave the mother because he had to protect her and had to help take care of her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One thing that you see sometimes, so a progression that you see sometimes, and I think co-sleeping's fine for families. There are families that it works well for. I mean, there's all of that. But you have some complexity of relationships sometimes that one parent will start sleeping with the child as a young child to help get the child to sleep. You know, you read to them, you do whatever you help get them to sleep. But then there's some issues within the the partnered subsystem, right? Something else, not related to the child, but something between the partners. Well, that other partner may continue to sleep with the child as part of a way to distance him or herself from the other partner, right? That's giving them some distance. But then that having someone who cares about you, your close relationship shifts from being the partnered relationship to the parent-child relationship, which we should be close with our children. I'm not saying that. I'm saying, but if you shift that responsibility to the child, then you'll see a lot of direction from the parent to the child that does really isolate the other parent. That's something that we see a lot, and it's something that it starts perfectly normal. It's exactly what the family needs at the time, but then because of these other complex issues that occur, it becomes not what the family needs later, right? And that is not because you shouldn't be sleeping with your child. It's because co-sleeping can be fine, but it's because there's a complexity within that partnered relationship that's fouling it up, you know, and it leads to an enmeshment. And just exactly what Patricia said, then the other person is isolated from that relationship and from the child in a sense.
And then they'll grow up, and the son and the father, they won't have a relationship at all. And I'm not going to lie, in these readings, there's some things I went, you know. I mean, one of my children is grown, and I look at the things, I read things, I went, I did that with him. And I shouldn't have done that. And, you know, it's kind of been an eye-opener. And I told my husband this morning, I said, I think we need to be in therapy, dear.
I think we all need to be, Patricia. It's part of life, you know. It's part of life to say that reflection piece and like what I have to get a little insight, fostering someone else to foster some insight for us. That really helps. And we do make a lot of these decisions. And the thing about decisions that take hold is that they serve a purpose, and they might have served the right purpose initially. But that doesn't mean that they will always serve the right purpose as other things occur. That's where therapy does help the family.
I would just like to add, going back to that example, not only could it be issues like between the spouse, but it could be like we were talking about earlier with the father or their mother or whoever sleeping with the child or not sleeping with the child is not wanting to step up and serve that role. So it could be not only issues between the spouse, but also issues between the I don't want to say non-custodial because they're still in the household, but that parent and the child.
Yeah, you're exactly right. You see, that's the other piece of it. It's easy to look at one situation, and you should be cautious about asking for examples because it's easy to look at a situation and apply one perspective to it. But as a family counselor, you have to look at the full range of complexity. So what purpose does it serve? What purpose does it serve? If in this situation we're talking about, this example, does it serve a purpose of, does that enmeshed relationship serve as a buffer between the partnered relationship? Or does that enmeshed relationship serve as an isolating variable for the other partner who wants the freedom, needs the freedom for some reason, or not going to take the custodial parent role, as like Lori said? You know, or what other purpose does it serve? You have there can be multiple purposes that are served, and also it can be it can really take this thing that we'll say. I'll say to you a lot if I ever have you an internship too. Like the truth lies beneath the surface, and the surface just lies. So you know we really have to get in there to find out what's going on and what works and what doesn't. The difference with Jenna and Alita both mentioned the caution of the like how do you do this well and not overstep, not make it counseling or therapy that's about you as a counselor.
Right.
So how do you disclose appropriately? How do you gather information without it being just like a machine gun interview? Right? You're just asking questions, firing questions, firing questions. That's that piece of like the with your clients, how the getting in there and then not applying just your single most perspective. Like when you watch, and I'm sure a lot of you will love Dr. Phil. Sure you do. But when you watch therapists on TV, they got a short time frame they're working with, I guess, and they apply a lot of themselves and their own judgment to that approach. Mm-hmm. That's different in structural family therapy. You are assessing families. You are making decisions and determinations and judgments about family relationships, but you're trying to do that by watching the family process in front of you. Not just saying, well, co-sleeping, I don't agree with co-sleeping. Parents shouldn't co-sleep with a child after 2 or whatever. You know, whatever your thing is that you want to apply. Like, you don't do that. You get in there and you watch the processes of the family, and then you try to say, so what works structurally for this family, what is not working within the family, what processes are not working, and what structures are maintaining those non-working processes. And how do we change those structures? All right, so the boundaries, is a piece I did want to mention, and we've talked about hierarchy and power quite a bit. As you think about going into your session, if you haven't already done your video, do you have any questions about doing your video right now? Shifting away from and it can be about the structural piece, but kind of shifting away from that to that assignment. Questions about the assignment. Do you have any questions?
How do we turn it in?
Okay. To turn it in, you've got a couple of options, and this will open up when your module opens up. You'll see it. So you're in a small group, and I actually split the small groups down a little smaller today when I was working, when I was trying to put that module together, because I didn't want you to have to watch quite so many sessions is what I had put you in. But you'll either post it. You can, if you want to post it in YouTube and like right in our Google community site, that's fine. This is a mock session. If you feel that you do not want to do that, you would rather post it in Blackboard, that's perfectly fine too. I'm going to open discussion board, and I'm going to put, I'm going to open the discussion board, and I'll do a forum for each of our review groups. And if you'll just post it in your review group forum, that'll be fine. So really, whichever way is the easiest for you. And if you're working with, like if let's say, if some of you had talked about working with a group of you, you're going to form your family and do it, those are certainly perfectly appropriate to put just in the Google community. And our Google community is not, everybody is not in there. So, I mean, like out in the world, the public's not all in there. But if you are working with a real family and you would be more comfortable posting it in Blackboard, I certainly support that too. Any other questions about the video? All right, well then, as we're wrapping it up today, I want to end on one thing that Taylor and Mecca were both mentioning, because I think that the communication piece, sometimes with structural, we'll get really focused on the structure and we'll forget. We're going to focus on we'll have some theories later that'll be heavily focused on communication styles and that piece. And structural is a little less focused on it. But structural does also focus on it, and how the children talk to each other. Taylor mentioned that, like what do you see about the children's interactions, if it's a family with children, like how they interact, and the tones they use, and the power what's the power balance of the children. All of that matters too, and the communication, like how the communication styles of the family, when are they comfortable? Like, you'll see families shift from being uncomfortable with you and or uncomfortable in a certain discussion to really comfortable with each other and their more natural selves. That's why you want to do the activities, because when you start an activity, the family starts, they interact with each other, and they kind of forget you. And then you get to see their real selves. Like, how do they communicate? What do they sound like? And where's the warmth? Because within those warmths and those positive relationships, those are your strengths that you can build on, so your rebalancing can be pretty positive. Communication definitely matters. Well, anything else? Everybody's screens are getting a little darker because I think during the day it's a little darker outside. It's always interesting to watch that. Well, if there's nothing else, then I will open up Module 3 pretty soon, so you can see information about the video if you need it. And next week, really, our focus is going to be, what we're going to do is you'll watch your small group videos, and then during our and there's a review sheet. You'll complete that review sheet for the videos that you watch so that you'll have notes about the videos, because I want you to have some real examples when we talk about them next week. But you won't turn those review sheets into me, so you don't have to put extensive information. Just put what you need to jog your memory about the videos. And then we'll have our group discussion. We'll talk about the videos and about the sessions, and I'll have watched them, and we'll have some feedback for your second session, and we'll have some feedback about how your theory piece is coming into your session. Okay. All right. Well, if you have any questions for me anytime, just let me know, and that's it. I hope you have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Get down.